everybody's doing ice baths, everybody's doing cold exposures, everybody's doing cold showers. Like it's about time, honestly. Like it is about time. I had an old client contact me and say, hey man, remember that shit that we were talking about like 4 or 5 years ago about cold exposures? I was like, yeah. He was like, man, you were ahead of the curve on that. I'm like, well, I wasn't really. It was more the people that I was learning from, Brian McKenzie, Rob Wilson, The Art of Breath, like stuff like that really exposed me to all of that stuff, which is finally becoming like popular, right? So it used to be before you talk about cold showers or cold exposures or ice baths, contrast therapy, stuff like that, and people would be like, fuck no, I'm not doing that. And now it's like, oh yeah, this Andrew Huberman guy, he's a genius, which he is, but he didn't come up with it. He just exposed people to it, and now it is so popularized and mainstream that everybody's doing it, which is good. Now, here's where you guys are still missing the mark with the cold exposures. The number one thing that cold exposure does for you is not hormone production, is not all of the physical benefits of getting into the cold on a regular basis. It is not that, right? It is not. It is the ability to, every time you get into the ice, it sends you into a fight or flight sympathetic response every single time. And if you train in combat sports, if you get into fights regularly, if you're in law enforcement or firefighting, first responders, like where you deal with stress on a regular basis, like real stress, like people might be dying stress, right? Whether or not that ends up actually occurring doesn't matter. It's the fact that you are dealing with that stress all the time. You know what that feels like. And to try to simulate that in training is super, super hard. Like you can work on getting your heart rate up and then going to the range, or getting your heart rate up and then going and doing some drilling on the mats, or doing some live rolls under fatigue. And that gets you pretty close. But I have not had anything like cold exposures that sends you to that point where you're like, holy crap, this feels like I am in a vehicle pursuit, right? Or I am in the middle of a fight right now, right? So when you get into the ice, your body sends you to that shift. It sends you sympathetic. It sends you fight or flight. And then it is your job, while you are in that moment, to maintain cognitive awareness, to maintain higher thought process, and harness that, and to bring it back down. And to do that as quickly as possible. So you learn how to shift yourself up with the ice, and then shift yourself in it back down. And once you can control that breath rate, heart rate, sympathetic response, and calm yourself down in the middle of that stress, that is the number one thing that cold exposure does for you. And if you are not training that yet within your practice, like add that in. Add in breathing, add it in to your cold exposures. And when you're done, when you shift down and you can down regulate inside of the ice, then you know, like, number one, I'm done, I can get out. And then two, I'm starting to utilize this for what it needs to be, right? And then from there, like you talk about the thermal layer that's built up while you're trying to, well, like let's say you calm down all the way, you crash out, you down regulate, and then you all of a sudden don't feel cold anymore, right? You can take that next minute or so and break up that thermal layer, working on your breathing, and then that increases the cold. That'll send the sympathetic response back up, and then you ride this wave, basically, this roller coaster of sympathetic, parasympathetic. You shift up, it gets colder, you shift down on purpose, and then you just figure it out, right? So it's called state management. That is the thing that you are looking for inside of your cold work.